surprising. Hearing is one of our earlier developed senses. So by the time you're 2, hearing is pretty well developed. Unlike vision, vision takes longer. And what studies have shown is that if you have an unaddressed hearing problem at 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, where they only really find out when you're 5 or 6, those years are very important for your psychological, education, communication, development, to such an extent that a lot of kids who aren't caught early enough are essentially tracked as being difficult or withdrawn. So by the time you can address the problem, the years of the damage is hard to redress.
Welcome everybody to Learning with Lowell. Today we're joined with Jennifer Goodall. I do not believe she's related to the other Goodall. She is the CEO of MindAffect. Jennifer, welcome to the show. And are you related to Jennifer, the other Goodall?
I definitely get asked that all the time. I wish I were. I love her work, and she's an amazing woman. So I used to pretend that we were related. And she actually spoke at my business school graduation, but I never got to meet her. But no, I'm not related in any way to Jane Goodall. So sadly, yeah, that's the case.
Yeah. A quick note. Uncle Sam wants you to help make this show successful. Subscribe and become a member today.
But I am related to Bobby and Pete Goodall, who are my parents.
That makes more sense, yeah.
Yeah. So, and they were school teachers in a small town in Massachusetts. So not quite Jane Goodall's sort of global, global expertise in groundbreaking, anthropology work, but still close.
I've been talking with her about coming on the show, and if she is, I'll see about her adopting you. Like maybe semi-unofficially.
I would be. But I have like, how some people have a superpower. Well, I have kryptonite, and my kryptonite is famous people. So when I speak to famous people, I can't speak. I get really shy. So hopefully I will just sort of memorize a few lines and not look like a fool.
Yeah.
But I get asked literally all the time.
Okay. You could always record like, thank you for adopting me in advance. When she asks you a question, you can just push, or just like, thank you, no, yes. You can just like do that. So you don't have to speak. You can be like a little robot.
That's cool. That's cool. I have had people who I've had meetings with them, and then at a certain point they just start calling me Jane. It's like, so Jane, how do you feel today? And I'm like, well, actually, my name is Jennifer, but if it's an important client, I'll say but you can call me Jane. That's fine. So yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah. I think looking at your backstory, you have some of the things that who's the guy who founded Amazon? It's not Warren Buffett. I don't know why I'm thinking of that. He's the bald guy. Who's the guy who Amazon?
Goodness. Now
we're both founder of Amazon. Everyone's gonna make fun of us. Founder of Amazon.
Oh, Bezos.
There you go. Yeah, the bozo. So he started at Wall Street, and then he founded his company, and then it got really big. So if we look at that structure, great things should be coming to MindAffect.
Oh, thanks. A little pressure. Yeah. Me, Jeff Bezos. How about me and Michael Bloomberg, who actually used to work at the same company and left a few years before I started. And I think he did pretty well at something as well. So no pressure. Did you meet him? Was he like a neat person, or was he just like an average Joe? No. I never met him. So he left in 81 when I started at the same company in 85. So he was long gone. But he created it was Salomon Brothers, a big Wall Street house. And he created this whole internal system for us to communicate with everybody from floor to floor and to be able to access data. And then something happened, I guess, and they didn't want to keep investing in it. So he went off to do his own thing, which perhaps you've heard of, which got really popular and amazing. But for years, there was this thing where at Salomon, you couldn't have a Bloomberg screen, which was really a drag because Bloombergs were so much better than the old system that we were using. So it's kind of a funny thing. But it is funny to leave Wall Street. I left Wall Street many years ago to move to the Netherlands. And I did banking here in the Netherlands for a really, 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 really long time. And I finally just had done every deal I wanted to do, every transaction. And I was really tempted to see what else I had in me, because banking can be fun. It's especially the kind of banking that I was doing. But I was solving puzzles all day for other people. And it's challenging. You get paid pretty well, but it's very two-dimensional. And when you really start working for your own business, not only do you solve problems and puzzles every day, but you're deciding what universe that puzzle should even be played in, or should you play that game at all? So it's very much a three-dimensional experience and tests your mettle quite a bit more than banking.
What is, so I've heard of Bloomberg terminals before, but why are they so revered? I've not done banking or stock stuff.
So I don't. So well, imagine you look a little young compared to me, maybe, but
I'm like 30.
Okay, so can you imagine a world without the internet?
I didn't have internet until I was 15, so yes.
Okay, so just imagine you're 12 and
yes.
No, I mean, and you have thousands of people you need to speak to every day, all of whom need to know exactly what you're doing to, in banking, do a large transaction potentially worth hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. So you have an office in London, an office in Singapore, maybe the client lives in Canada. So you're dealing with, remember the old-fashioned phones that you used to have to hold? What Bloomberg did was he sort of created the internet. So we were all connected through cables. So through a special, communication system, we could all be doing a trade for someone, one buyer here, one seller there, and the trader and everyone in the middle sitting next to me. And then you could just do these transactions. Basically, you could do simultaneous. The only other way to do that was with multiple phone lines. You had two people on each ear. I actually used to wear earrings, but I was on the trading floor for so long that it started hurting too much. So I never wore earrings again. Or we had fax machines, and they would always break when you needed them the most. So with the Bloomberg screen, you can send things, you can do tickets through Bloomberg. And then also he built this really great system of information about how bonds were trading, stocks, all sorts of stuff. But for example, if we were going to plan a trip, you know how you go now, Google Tickets or something like that. In those days, the only online tool we had that I know was available was I think it was Fly One or something. And that was, kind of a precursor to what what we all have for free in the internet.
And then what is is there any utility? Like, what is the use of Wall Street? All I know about, when I hear about Wall Street, it's never good things. Do they do anything good? Do they make the world better? Or do they just move beans around? What is the utility of Wall Street?
Well, I'm not here to defend.
I was just wondering.
I left Wall Street. I did Wall Street, man.
Yes.
I did Wall Street for 25 years. So I'm not here to defend it.
Yes.
And there are an awful lot of awful people on Wall Street. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of movies, and I've actually met those people and worked with those people. So, but essentially, I do believe that you need to, companies need to raise capital. And Wall Street is kind of you have the capital providers. For example, your pension fund. I don't know if you have a pension fund, but I'm sure you know someone with a pension fund, an insurance company. They have to invest. And they need a way to do that. And one of the ways to do that was an investment bank would go to a large private company who also needed capital to grow. So they would then bring that company in an organized fashion into the market and create, share certificates that could be sold to not just pension funds and insurance companies, but also it could be made small enough packages that it could be sold to you. So it basically helps felicitate capital going from people who need to invest and want to invest to people who want to use it in the right way to grow the company and grow the businesses. And it helps make the credit markets just that much more efficient, because it's a very viciously competitive market. So they're all trying to outbid each other. So when they do, that means that, I don't know, if you were IBM and you wanted to borrow money, it's a great way to borrow money is to call 4 investment banks and say, hey, what's my price on a 10-year bond? And they know that they're bidding. And instead of a 3% coupon, maybe you end up with 2.5%. So it creates a very efficient way to allocate capital. That's how it was set up. But then, of course, whenever you're moving that much large sums of money through kind of a small funnel, a lot can get siphoned off. And so then you had a lot of the excesses, particularly old days. Yeah. So I would imagine you would really miss if Wall Street were, the U.S. would not be where it is if there were no longer a Wall Street.
Yeah, I was just wondering because if Jane Goodall is like the anthropologist for monkeys, I was wondering if you could be the anthropologist for Wall Street, and it does sound like there's some utility there. That when you're a large enough organization, you get to kind of dictate your interest rates because you get to negotiate with other people a little bit, and then the people you're negotiating with have like somewhat of a bar that they don't like to go below. I was talking to a person with a lot of money, and he said that you can go to a bank and you can negotiate your interest rate, which is like to like 1%, and you basically get it to what the bank gets the money from. I was like, oh, that's kind of weird that the banks get the money at a certain rate, and then you can get it like basically marginally above what the banks get. But like the average person pays like 8% when they get a loan. It's like, so at a certain point, it seems like money, when you have enough money, it's like things are nicer for you in terms of interest rates.
Oh, for sure. So it is kind of counterintuitive, I guess, if you look at it that way, although that story sounds a little kooky. But banks will love to lend to people who are what's called a very good credit risk. And a good credit risk means that they know they're getting their money back plus the interest rate, which is their return. As a result, they're willing to charge less because the risk is lower. And that's the most important thing I think you can learn about banking or finance is risk reward. So if the risk is higher, you want more money to compensate for taking more risk. And consequently, if the risk is lower, you'll charge less because that's a more certain return.
Yeah.
So those are kind of basic. Yeah, sorry, some of that's just so inbred in me that I just assume the world knows that. But now I work with all these AI scientists, and it's hysterical. These are like the really smart kids that you're like, oh God, those guys. And now I'm their boss. It's hysterical because I'm always amazed that these, they have PhDs and all this other stuff. And then they're like, well, I don't know, the questions they ask are just hysterical. But it's not a world they're familiar with. So
from the finance side of things, like it's like those are the questions that they're curious about. That financial literacy in general. I'm just trying to be clear. Is that like where they ask weird questions or funny questions?
Oh, they'll ask really interesting questions like, they don't ever work in Excel. Do you work in Excel?
Only
Excel.
when I have to. I usually do everything by hand, and then I put it in an Excel spreadsheet just to make the sums easier. I'll do an Excel spreadsheet, but then I do like my double booking by hand because I like paper.
Oh, I like paper too. Like I take notes.
Yeah.
On everything. Like I have notebooks like that. I have a stack of them. I never read them. Well, I read them maybe 1 month back, but they just helps me remind me what people are saying while I'm writing it. But Excel is like breathing for me. So I have everything in Excel. Everything. So but anyway, so they don't understand like and Excel is a pretty basic thing. So they're working in Python and all this. So I'll have to explain some really basic concepts. I don't know. I can't even think of it, but it is pretty funny.
Is there a useful, function or whatever in Excel that people don't use that you use often? I use Excel, but I'll add the rows together and do the sum, or I'll multiply it to get percentages and stuff. I use very basic Excel. Is there a cool function that I'm not using that people tend not to use that you use?
Well, what I use all the time is something that allows you to review your formula. So where did what cells are supporting this formula in this row? Because when you have big models and you get an answer, it's like, oh shit, where did that come from? So you're like, you double click on this special thing and it gives you all the arrows of where, whether you added this or subtracted that, and what cell it came from and what row or what sheet in the, what tab in the Excel. But that's my go-to. I love that one.
So because you know Wall Street, banking, finance so well, were you able to translate that into doing your round and doing your capital arrangements with MindAffect? So you got like really, really good deals? Like, were people more willing to give you money, and then when they gave you money, you got really good deals because of it in your mind? Compared to like when you talk to other startup founders, you're like, wow, why would you accept that? And they're like, well, I didn't know there was a better deal out there. I didn't know you could do this.
Well, I hope so, because I'm in the middle of a financing round now. So I'm really hoping that my financial acumen starts showing some value at some point. I think what's useful is projections. All the analytics, financial modeling is all done. And a lot of founders who are brilliant scientists or medical people in my space, or engineers in other spaces, that's something that they would find just so painful and difficult. So for me, that's very easy. So anytime an investor wants to watch, let's talk valuation, or let's look at these projections, I'll say, oh, excellent. Let's look at my model, and I'll just change a few things, and then they get exactly what they need. At the end of the day, for a startup, I think being very well organized with your businesses and your finances is important, because it shows that you'll be around for the long term. But what's really important is the idea, the market, the phase of the product of your product and where it is. So whether, for example, in medical certification, or how, biggest question, how close are you to revenue? When's first revenue? Where's your MVP? Where's your validation? So those are really key. The financing, to me, I consider the financial model, the business plan, again, that's all stuff I was trained to do, and spent many years doing it. I consider it good housekeeping, but so it really helps. I think what's very interesting for me is running this AI startup, thinking along, again, this 3D element of what can we do with this superpower of the technology that we have. And that's been just, even though I was a banker for years and did lots of exciting, fun things, that's really cool. So that's like having a real superpower and not just being essentially a human calculator for some business to make more money. So that's actually a whole new side of myself that I think I always had, but just never used to the right extent. Maybe I used it to the extent possible in banking, because I was pretty creative on the deals that I did and a lot of the clients that I covered. But this is a whole different. It's like going from, I don't know, a Fiat to a Porsche. It's just different speed, just completely different experience. It's cool. Well, it's tiring, but cool.
Yeah, I haven't been at Wall Street, so I haven't driven a Fiat or a Porsche. Maybe the next
time
I'll
drive,
go.
Barely drive. I have an Audi, so. But I'm just trying to,
Yeah, I know. I'm just teasing you because you came from Wall Street. I like Wolf of Wall Street people and their, car doors that go up and stuff. But so.
Yeah, I don't even know if they have cars.
Yeah,
they just have their helicopter.
Then, when you are talking to other startup founders and what have you, is there anything structurally different than what you're doing? It sounds like there's a level of preparedness that lets them feel like, all right, the risk reward's better, so then you get better like financially numbers potentially, so they take less equity or whatever you're able to give them. But is there anything like structurally you do differently? I know a lot of people use safes when they're early enough, but that Y Combinator's kind of pioneered some.
Well, I think there's a lot of structural things when you raise a financing round. So you need to understand the structure of the different documents, shareholder agreement, subscription agreement, articles of association, term sheets, and negotiating those. It's really helpful to know what could be the issue ahead of time. And that's something that, I have years of experience negotiating documents. So, I guess it's a superpower. Not that I'm a lawyer, because I think they're even worse than banker. No, I'm kidding. My husband's a lawyer, so I can say that. But when you go through an entire document, there's not a lot of mystery there for me. So I can negotiate hard without, and I also know how I'm relatively comfortable negotiating. To me, I decide ahead of time, do I want this deal to get done or not? And if I don't need to get done, poof, I know, I ask for the world. But you always want to try and get the deal done and give away, I think, as much as you can, but make certain you get everything you need. And then, see what room is left. And so that's something that I'm quite comfortable. I enjoy that, actually. Like if I had a choice of, I don't know, partying with my friends or negotiating, I don't know. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
So it's, I think that's probably a huge help. And plus, having been a banker, I can make slides and models and things like a maniac.
Do you, so there's many different types of negotiation. There's like strategy and stuff that people use. Who's the guy that everyone thinks is a war criminal? He was in the White House for a while in the 70s. He carpet bombed Laos. He's still alive. All right, there's a guy.
Kissinger?
Yeah, Kissinger. People think he's a war criminal. So he said that what he likes to do when he negotiates with people is he'll just say what he wants. Like he'll be as closest to what he's looking for as possible, and then negotiate closer versus saying like, I want something really high, and then like try to negotiate people down. He like tries to get right there, and then when people think that he's trying to negotiate down, he's like, no, that's what it is. And then he just kind of like puts the gun on the table and is like, this is what we're talking about.
I love that. I love that. I didn't know he. I've never studied Kissinger, but I love that. No, look, look, life's short. And there are some people who live to simply negotiate. Sorry, I've got a business to run, and I've got other people then to take the spot of some joker who's wasting my time. So I think that's really cool. I like that. I've never heard that. I think that there are some. What's interesting is to learn how to negotiate in different cultures.
Oh yeah.
So that's how you do it. Yeah. For example, so the way that Kissinger did it, or the way that you mentioned he did it, that's how I would negotiate with someone, perhaps maybe the Netherlands or Norwegian, sort of Northern Europe. But if you're doing maybe Southern Europe, they really think that if you start here, then they've reframed the whole negotiation range to here. So it's a little bit like you have to realize what style of culture that you'll be negotiating in. Because sometimes you have to say, okay, well, I want the world, just because if you don't ask, their feelings are hurt. And then they think you're here. So then they're going to try and bring you here. And you're like, no, I'm here because you should be here. And that's also, I remember in banking, because I would have to negotiate with my Greek clients, get a deal, and then bring it to credit risk. And, if they were unreasonable, if I didn't negotiate in the right way, then we never came to an agreement. I couldn't bring it, because then I have to sell it. I would have had to sell it to risk and make sure it was a good deal for the bank. So it is, it's funny. I haven't thought about that in a long time.
Is there a culture that are the hardest negotiators, but they get the best results? Because there's some people who are like hard in terms of a bad way, where like they ask for the moon, but they don't understand how to like finagle it around to actually get what they're looking for. So they lose a lot of deals. So who are like the best negotiators, but actually get results at the same time that you've experienced, like the cultural wise?
Culture. Oh yeah. I like Northern Europe, I think is the most reasonable. It's just, they're not, they've got other things to do. So, this is not an end game. This is not the whole game. This is just a means to an end. So let's get to the end and let's start to work. And also what happens, and I think this is really important in negotiations, particularly for startup founders or CEOs, when you're negotiating to bring on a new equity player. It's kind of like negotiating the prenup right before the wedding. Like, you're not going to want to hate each other before you walk down the aisle. And I think some people forget that. You're negotiating to get a deal done and to have a long-term value-added relationship and respected relationship on both sides. And I've had a case where actually that didn't happen. And the lawyer on the other side was such a horrible human being that I stopped speaking to them. They really needed me involved in this deal. I stopped, got my own lawyer, and said, I won't speak to you. And we're starting from scratch. Everything we've negotiated at this point is now gone, off the table. And I'm restarting. And either you're in or you're out. And I don't think it's right and a good strategy to push someone to that point, because then they're 1 foot's out the door.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like if you were going to negotiate your employment contract with a company, do you want them to try and say, yeah, but every time you drink water from the water fountain, we deduct 10 cents? Like,
mm-hmm.
Give me a break, dude. If there's absolutely no respect for each other during the negotiation process, to me, I use that as, your dating period as well. Yeah. Like, we know we're trying to get to a fair point for everyone, but we're also on a relationship and a respected long-term relationship.
Yeah,
I feel pretty passionate about this. I'm sorry.
I like
great.
it.
Yeah.
No, I like it. It makes a lot of sense to me because I've worked with people who they were the type that would just keep trying to skin you over and over again. Like they just like you'd shake their hand, they would try and take a pinky and whatever. I just kept telling this person, if you're trying to negotiate deals with someone who you want to then work with you.
Relationships. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, this person, just how I'm reading their body language, and I'm going to talk to them later. I bet they're going to say X, Y, and Z to me without my prompting. And they're basically going to feel like you're like stealing their kidney, like you're like really being inappropriate here. He's like, well, who cares? Well, I'm getting the best deal I can. It's like, oh, okay, but that person's going to work. If you end up making a deal with them, they're going to work minimally, and they're probably going to try and find something else if they're in a position.
You felt perhaps on your side, you felt humiliated and disrespected, and those are not two key tenets of the beginning of a long-term relationship that you want to establish.
Yeah.
As an employer and employee, so it is. And also I think there's an issue of trust about what that person will do in the future and how empowered you make each other feel to be able to do that. Because that's another thing about a startup that you don't experience so much, for example, in an established large company. A startup is like a bicycle. It's a cool bicycle. But you need to pedal hard and fast because there's a lot of hills. And anything that's downhill and easy is usually bumpy and muddy and you can fall and slip. So you need so much positive energy and support and motivation to get on that bike every morning and pedal your ass off to make sure you're beating the odds every bump in the road. And if you don't feel empowered or respected by your team or your shareholders or your stakeholders. Okay, if it's one or two, but if it becomes sort of a thing and you think, why am I doing this? If you need the wind in your back. Mm-hmm. And I imagine that's perhaps how you feel when you walk into a job position and you feel like, the main person they had me talking to on the way in was so disrespectful. Like, what does this mean for the whole company? Is that how they all feel?
Yeah, it sets a bad standard. That I think in one scenario, I literally kicked the guy out of the negotiations from then on out because I think it didn't
just like
represent.
I said, dude, you're out of here.
Yeah.
But to be able to do that, unfortunately, you had to decide to yourself, I'm willing to walk away. Because you don't say that kind of thing without risk.
Yeah.
And do you really want your new shareholder, your new employee to feel that as a leader of a company? I mean, let's face it, we're leading a company so we can get everyone's energy, motivation, and talents kind of in the same direction. Mm-hmm. And is that the standard you want to set? I don't think so.
I have a lot of friends who are out working, like they're looking for jobs or what have you. And some that are founders, and thankfully with the founder ones, I can talk to them about how to recruit and hire people in the right way. Because like there's a lot of like really bad modalities out there. But anyway, so the people who are looking for jobs, they get like, I'm hearing all these horror stories, like they showed up 30 minutes late and blah, blah, blah. It's like, why were you there after 7 minutes? you leave after 5 and you write them an email saying, hey, whatever, and move on. Like, they don't respect you. Like, move on. If they'll reschedule with you if it was an accident, if they like ran over. Like, but sitting there for 30 minutes, that's ridiculous.
But who was late for whom? The company or the employee?
The company to the potential employee.
Yeah. We don't do that.
Yes. Yeah, I wouldn't think so. You seem like you're not.
We don't, because I mean, why? I don't know. I guess I also, perhaps one of the reasons I thought about switching, or I've been thinking about it for a long time, but at the end of the day, it's kind of nice to readdress your karma and say, okay, why don't we just really think about being a little bit more of a better force in the world?
Mm-hmm.
So what's the point of being a negative force? Like, how many people really get joy out of just being mean? And if that's the kind of person you are, then maybe you need to rethink that. Like, how could that really make someone happy? But they're
curmudgeons. But and you're out there. I think if you're in a spot where you can know your value, because sometimes people are in a position where they've come from not the greatest position, and they have like college debt or whatever, and they're getting like these terrible offers out there. If only there was a way to like collectively bargain. Okay, here's a question. I'm like tangenting really hard on this one, by the way, but I just thought of something. I was talking to a business friend of mine, and he was telling me, or she, I will not dox them, that they thought unions were anti-capitalist. As someone who worked Wall Street, do you think unions are anti-capitalist? I don't think so. They seem like another example of capitalism, like a bunch of people working together for a common good. That's like kind of capitalist.
Okay. Well, look, my parents were part of a teachers union, and that was a very important part of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the eldest child. So, of course, these are things that helped us have a good life because they were able to get good medical care and good pensions.
Mm-hmm.
And they worked incredibly hard for not a lot of money. But and as a Wall Street person, you're not unionized. There was, I think I might have even been part of a union at ABN AMRO Bank. Like in the Netherlands, everybody's a union. So I'm not quite sure what it really does for you. And I think there's forms of it that are different in all sorts of countries and all sorts of sectors. But in general, if you go back to the concept of fairness, if you have a marketplace where all the employers, you only have 3 employers in the whole country, like Amazon, Walmart, and I don't know who else. Tesla.
Target. Yeah, Tesla.
Target or whatever. So in a way, they've kind of unionized, and they've basically squeezed out sort of any sort of competition.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have to be very careful to say, well, how fair is it that you don't let the other side of the table be organized in a similar way? But if you have hundreds of thousands of places where people can find work easily, then theoretically the employment wages and benefits should compete appropriately so that you're not overpaying people, but also you're not forcing your workers to also have to live off of food stamps and other things. So, I haven't answered your question because I think it's a really difficult question.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, for example, anger the French, but, I think they have, really strong unions. And they strike all the time. And, I think they can retire. Some sectors can retire at age 55 with full pay, So, okay, do I think that that's fair and reasonable? I wouldn't mind retiring 55 with full pay.
Mm-hmm.
But I probably would still do this. So, but it is, I find it hard. If the 2 sides of this equation get too out of whack on either side, then it needs to be addressed in a fair way, because you need to let capital meet people and people meet capital in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it becomes, you get people locked into jobs at too high a pay, and then they drive down the competitive nature of the entire business.
Yeah.
So look at GM versus Tesla. One is unionized, one isn't.
Yeah.
From there, draw your own conclusions. And I don't want to, I'm not super knowledgeable in the car industry or anything, but that's what I'm saying is yeah, I'm not against people earning fair wage and having good health care. And, do I think colleges should cost $80,000 a year? No. But those are a lot of the things that are in the US, but they're not necessarily, for example, here in the Netherlands.
Yeah, America's weird. America's a really weird place. And I also hear your concern about upsetting the French. They do like to riot. They get upset a lot. You're moving the retirement age 1 year. They burned down Paris. And Americans are a little bit more easygoing, I think. It's because we're really big of a country, I think. But actually, to talk about Americans real quick, what is the American style of negotiation? Do you think it's a good one? Like, from your point of view, I'm too immersed in America to see myself, I think, and how I negotiate. So what is the American style culturally of a negotiation?
I don't think I know.
Yeah.
I don't think I know.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's so funny. I've lived in Europe now since 1994. So I can tell you what it's like right like this with someone from Finland or Norway or Greece or Italy or, but I assume I do the American negotiation style because I haven't really negotiated with anybody in the States for so long. So I would just walk in there with my regular style and sort of expect that they would try and be reasonable. But it would then depend on, are they private equity? Like I've dealt with the private equity guys, not in my field today, but in my past. And so then you would really start what kind of person is this? And a lot of times you'll go and try and find out what their background is first before you get on the phone. Because the one thing you do know is typically Americans can be quite aggressive. Not that I think I am. I don't know. I can't measure myself. Perhaps everyone's laughing hysterically at the thought that I don't think I'm aggressive. But yeah. So what you'll do is if you know the sector they're in and you'll get a background of, you look at their LinkedIn, you'll know this guy thinks his shit doesn't stink, So, you have to really sort of get all the information on the table, always try and get them to make the first offer. So you can, on the other side, you can build your, the landscape. So are we talking, is there a tree here or are we in a smooth field or are we in some sort of pit in a dark hole? You just want to put your lights on as much as possible. So get as much information from the other side to see how they handle certain questions. And then from there, like if you're buying a house or something, always get the seller to give you the first real selling price, not the one that they've listed. So then you can start filling in around these different questions before you start going for what you need or want, because that will change in the process. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I don't have an answer, but I would always put them in the sector where they're located, because different people have different types of businesses, have different types of styles, and they attract that kind of person, and they all want to hire that kind of person as well. So.
That's interesting. So I could see it where if I was talking to someone in the energy sector, I was going to negotiate something, I could potentially reach out to a different person in the energy sector and be like, hey, can I have a frank conversation with you to prepare for the other person? Because it's
100%.
Yeah,
totally.
That's interesting.
And also, the other thing is, imagine, you said the energy sector. So I did a lot of business in the energy sector, from fracking to, gas, offshore stuff. So you also have to understand that they believe that their sector is noble. I mean, they've spent 20 or 30 years of their lives dedicated to these sectors. So you have to get into the same puddle with them and believe also that what they're doing is quite noble, even if they are, doing whatever they're doing to the climate or the air or the water. And then you have to align with their vibration on this point, get more information, and only then can you start to formulate how you want to go. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think about it or talk about it. So sorry if it comes out a little.
No, it makes sense. You're very. If you think this is garbled, I would love to see you where you think you're peak precision, because that's probably like blowing through walls or something.
These are things that I do. So yes. I don't even. I've never spoken them before.
Yes. Well, I think you're doing a great job. I think it makes sense. Anyone out there who's about to go to a negotiation, I think the biggest thing I would add that is in this is that you're talking about, like, one of the underlying things is sometimes people just aren't comfortable negotiating. They feel like it's like an icky, like weird, sticky feeling. And so I think the first step is like get comfortable with that uncomfortableness if you're new to it, and then use all this information to have your confidence. So when you go into it, you know what you're worth, you know the landscape, you know all these different things. So instead of knowing you're going to go down this cavern and it's like completely pitch black and you get like a little tiny little tiny flashlight, the whole landscape, you have a big flashlight, you know where the bear's sleeping, you can be really quiet around the bear, you can do all these things. So like, I find that if you're nervous about these things, use all this knowledge and read the book Never Split the Difference, and all that combined, I think you'll do a much better job negotiating for your future. It's the weirdest thing is I really like hearing a lot of these things that people are going through when it comes to, like, people email me or comment like I'm having difficulty negotiating or whatever. Like, this is a topic that comes up quite often, actually. And really? So I think you've actually given a lot of different sides of it. And it seems like the women in particular struggle with it a lot. Like, I think guys, it seems like it's okay from what I'm reading. This is all anecdotal. What I'm reading is guys seem a little bit easier to like negotiate or be a little bit more, this is what I want. Like, women, it seems that it's a little harder. And so I think hearing from a woman, hey, here's my thought process. This is what I do. And it makes sense. And I think something that anyone listening could do and apply to their life, whether it's negotiating at Starbucks or they're going to go to grad school and they're trying to figure out, is this the place for me? Are these people going to treat me well? That type of thing. I think this is something that can be applied to anyone who's listening in. So focusing in on the really cool thing is that you're very, very prepared. And unlike some startups that come on here, that you gave me your pitch deck so I could like actually research you pretty well. Because sometimes it's like just what's on the internet, and it's like, I know the internet's not right, most of the time. Yeah, your website's actually pretty close. Like I didn't do like an analysis of this, like, but it felt like 1-to-1. But like there's websites that'll say, like, for instance, like, we'll talk about like AI in a minute. Like AI is a buzzword that many people put on there, but there's not a single lick of AI in their company. And I've talked to people, I don't know if it's been on the show, but I've talked to people where I asked that question, like, what is the AI component of your business? And by the third thing, it's like, well, we do Python. It's like, that's not AI or machine learning. That's just a programming language. Like, well, I don't know. No, the investors seem not to know. It's like, okay, I feel like that's like defrauding the investors. I don't know. In America, you probably should never defraud the investors. They get pretty ornery about it. But so in terms of end of a jail. Yes. Yeah. They can defraud you. Well, that's not true. Bernie Madoff, I think, went to jail. I think it's so if they defrauded you, you still get hit. Like, there's some level of like balanced playing field eventually. I don't know. Your smile makes me concerned. But so for MindAffect, what is your like 10-second elevator pitch for it for the people listening in? I could do my version of it, but I like to hear other people.
Okay. So just 10 seconds?
Well, you can take as much time as you want. I'll if you go too long, I'll just interrupt you and start asking questions about it.
Okay, cool.
Take as much time you want. Yeah.
Okay. The technology was developed out of the AI department at the Donders Institute of Neuroscience at Radboud University in Nijmegen, which probably none of those nouns in that sentence mean anything to anyone in the United States, except for a handful of neuroscientists. So it's one of the main universities here, and they have a whole department of people like this. So the head of the AI department, Professor Peter Descent, woke up one morning and said, and I don't know why he did this, by the way. He said, we can read brain signals. Mm-hmm. You know that. Everybody sort of knows that when you have stimulus coming into your brain, there's a lot of electrical impulses, and responses are happening. And with EEG headsets, you can read them. But it's really noisy. Yeah. And everything causes a brain response. Like, I'm moving my fingers, there's something going on. I'm talking to you, I'm listening to my voice. So my brain's just going all over the place. And what Peter thought of, Professor Descent, is if we code the stimuli going in, so if you take a tone or a note and you put almost like an SOS code on it at a certain frequency in decibel, he created a way of finding that back from the brain response. So if you hear a big beep, which is coded, he can see it back with our technology. And if you do that enough, you get enough data points that you can create, if someone's hearing something, or for example, if they're looking at something. And you can help use artificial intelligence to eliminate all the other functions that would be creating competing signals, because they don't have that code and they're not in that general time frame where you'd expect the response and in the general location of where you would expect that response.
Mm-hmm.
So long story short, he created this thing. It lets flashes of light from a computer screen, which is like a keyboard, and it allowed ALS locked-in patients that if they looked at one of these letters, which had this incredibly fast code, almost something that you couldn't even tell, the person, the locked-in patient, could spell essentially with their eyes and their brain response, and it could spell letters, which was cool, super cool to just do that with brain response. But there are a lot of competing technologies, and one of them is Corel, who does eye tracking, which is actually faster and a little bit cheaper. So, and that was already in the market. So I was brought in to say, what else can you do with this technology? And we thought of a couple of other things when I joined, and one is to use it for diagnostics. So why not just see if somebody can hear da 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 da, at different volumes. And it turned out that this methodology, the technology, could actually be used for hearing, it could be used for vision. And then we thought, well, hey, what if we package it up as like a hearing test, but a super cool hearing test, which you don't have to say anything or push a button or anything like that. So that's what we do. We build diagnostic tests that can filter out the correct brain response to the stimuli you care about, knowing whether the patient can hear it or see it or feel it. And then we can tell, without that person saying a word, in less than 10 minutes, how well they can hear or see, which for you or me is like, just push a button, you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But for people, and there's a lot of people who can't do that well, this is a lifesaver. So imagine infants, imagine 2-year-olds. Don't you want to know if your 2-year-old can hear or see? Well, right now, their choice is like, clapping to see if the kid turns around. I don't know about you, but these are very important basic functions that you should really know what this child has so you can address the problem, which, by the way, the treatments are readily available. They just don't know how to diagnose them properly and efficiently and fairly. So if you're a little kid and maybe you have autism, maybe you don't speak to anybody, but actually maybe you don't speak because you've been deaf for 5 years and you're just totally annoyed with the world. Mm. So filtering out these problems for people who can't speak for themselves, I don't know, it gives me a good feeling, but also it's a huge market. So It kind of gets both my jets cooking. I don't know, I really like it. But does that explain our technology? Oh,
yes,
cool.
I think it did. And one thing, if I'm remembering it right, it's not, the existing technology, when I was a kid, you go into a room and they would just go, they would like, it's on, off. Can you hear this? Can you not hear this? And one thing that I think is particularly interesting about yours is it's gradations. So it's like, how well are you hearing the sound at the same time, if I remember correctly? So you can diagnose more what's going on. It's not just, can you hear it or not? It's like, at what level are you hearing it? Are you starting to develop something that when you catch it early enough, you can do something about it? I thought that was particularly awesome because I think a lot of people, they go through the whole life and they're never sick. And that's great. Congratulations to everyone out there. Don't ever get sick. Do all the good things that the doctors say to do.
I totally recommend don't get sick. Sure.
Yes. But when most of medicine is being caught 2 inches off the ground, when there's a problem and they're trying to address it before you hit the ground, you either die or something bad happens. And so if you can see the early stages of something and really know where it is, you can intervene at that point and make an intervention that stops that cascade of stuff. So instead of catching them 2 inches off the ground and having to do some like pretty gnarly stuff to fix it potentially, you can do a smaller intervention potentially and have a bigger effect that can slowly, ramp up as people age or what have you. I thought that was in particularly very exciting, considering when you're going from like, or you can hear it to,
and even if you fail that pass-fail test,
then
what? What do they do then? How are they going to put a hearing aid on a kid who doesn't respond except for 1 or 2 times? Like the thought of putting a hearing aid on a child who actually can't move or speak, how do you know it works for them?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know it's not incredibly torturous or totally useless? And that's what I find. Yeah, sorry, I get goosebumps at the thought, because this one woman, she's actually on our video of our home screen, but she said she works at a child disability center. And she said, they would watch kids with cerebral palsy. They try, because cerebral palsy has a very high incidence. People with cerebral palsy have a very high incidence of other hearing and vision issues. But so they try very hard to at least address the problems they can. But she said, but then to fit the kid for the hearing aid, they throw him in a soundproof box and just hope he responds when he hears something.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, when you really want to find out the edge of where someone stops hearing and does hear, that usually doesn't elicit a strong response from people who aren't very responsive.
Mm-hmm.
So it is, well, I'm glad it made sense to you, because it's hearing, especially hearing, this is surprising. Hearing is one of our earlier developed senses. So by the time you're 2, hearing is pretty well developed. Unlike vision takes longer. And what studies have shown is that if you have an unaddressed hearing problem at 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, where they only really find out when you're 5 or 6, those years are very important for your psychological, education, communication, development, to such an extent that a lot of kids who aren't caught early enough are essentially tracked as being difficult or withdrawn. So by the time you can address the problem, the years of the damage is hard to redress.
Yeah. And
I often see, I speak at a lot of universities. I don't know why. Probably because they give me a free t-shirt. No, I'm kidding.
Mm-hmm.
But, also I do it for recruiting and stuff like that. And it's very rare in an audience of 50 kids, very rare that I'll have anyone with a hearing aid. And what does that mean if the population at that point would say, 2.5%, 3% should have a hearing problem? It doesn't mean that neuroscientists don't have hearing problems, or people with hearing problems don't become neuroscientists. It means, because you'll see it in every audience, it means that they're tracked because of these issues, which I find very sad.
Yeah, no, I agree. And personally, when I was in college, I thought you weren't supposed to see leaves when you were walking around, or you weren't able to see.
No.
I'm one of your population. So when I was in college,
You're my
and
vision guy. Yeah.
And I always sat in the back of the room because I couldn't see anything anyway. So I might as well just read the textbook and ignore people. And then I went to get glasses, and I was like, oh, I can see the text across the street, like across the road in the mall or wherever it was. And I was like, is it supposed to be that good? It's like, yeah.
How old were you?
I was like 18, 20. I went from being like a C student to like an A student.
But can you imagine?
Yeah,
can you imagine? We can catch that at 3 years old. With a test that actually the vision test is really quick. I mean, it's not fully developed yet for kids. We're now working. First, you do adults. Love R&D. Adults first. But the test is like 3 minutes, and we can do it. So I know a woman who's actually she works at a VC. And she said exactly the same thing. She said, I didn't know trees had leaves till I was 12.
Yeah.
But if that had been a hearing problem, you would not have been in college by then.
Yeah.
That's what's so funny, that somehow vision is. So I'll speak to kids, like 2/3 of us will have glasses. And not a single kid will have a hearing aid, maybe one.
I think it was third or second grade, I had a teacher. He was not a very good teacher. Everyone who doesn't like abusing kids might like dislike what I'm about to say. So there was a kid who was a little slower to respond. Like he would say something, and you could just tell he was just like, he wasn't dumb or anyway. Like you talked to him, and you just gave him a second, like he could hear you, but you'd have to speak a little louder or whatever for him to hear you. And the teacher that I had would just like whack him over the head with a newspaper. It's like, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. And I didn't like that teacher, so I kept pissing him off, so he would like come at me versus like yelling at the kid.
You're such a good person, but then
I have a problem with authority anyway, so it was probably gonna happen.
Yeah,
anyway.
me too. But didn't that help teach you to have a problem with authority? That experience?
I think I started with my parents, and then it definitely translated
But
there.
it went downhill, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of
authority's bullshit anyway. Don't you think?
Yeah. Well, yes. Yes.
I think so.
There's but just thinking about times of my life, and I think anyone listening, have there been times where someone spoke like couldn't hear you? So in my immediate family, there's a couple people that literally can't hear out of one ear. But you can't tell it unless they say something to you, right? Like, hey, talk to this year, not this year. And so when I was first meeting people, I was starting to talk to someone. He was ignoring me. He was like, oh, maybe I'm just not interested in this person. It's like, oh no, you have to talk to John's other ear to hear you. It's like, oh, okay. I wish I could have known that. I thought he was like, he hated what I was saying. I'm new here.
Right. Well, that's. Did you know that kids with autism who are diagnosed with autism, actually 10% have a hearing problem instead? Imagine what that does. Being diagnosed with autism with an unaddressed hearing problem. I mean, they mimic each other. And that's what the governments are really worried about, because they know this is a huge issue. And they know they all have mandated infant and childhood screening tests, but they all stink. So we're pretty excited. And we have some nice grants from the government to help us fund like this much of it. But
when I was reading your pitch deck, well, a friend of ours recommended you to me, and I don't know if he wants us to dox him, so I'll double check before I say anything. But he was on the show, so it's kind of obvious.
Yeah. No, Kirill is a great guy.
Yes,
we spoke together actually at one of these universities. That's how we got to know each other.
Yeah. Well, when I was learning about yours, the big thing that stood out to me is the 21st century is the century for precision, personalized medicine. And growing up in the 90s, what have you, it was on off. That's it. And you're in a bucket. And if you're in that bucket, then you're not getting the best. You're not getting like we're talking about. Just imagine the differences. Like for instance, it seems similar to me as malnourishment is to kids. So if you don't feed kids well, they lose 20 IQ points. Like you're saying, this whole conversation, imagine being 3 or 4, you can't hear, you can't see potentially as well, and now you can't learn. Like people just naturally will reach a point where they don't want to give you the best attention. Like everyone's been in a class where there's people in the front who are asking all the questions, and the teacher's a little nicer to them, and they have a parent that calls them anytime, that they don't get that type of treatment, and then maybe you have one in the corner over there who can't really hear, see anything, and he's just reading the textbook and minding his own business.
But imagine the feeling of constant rejection.
Yeah.
And not realizing it's not your fault.
Yeah.
Because you don't know any better. You don't know that you can't hear. I have a story about an ophthalmologist who he's not he's a surgical ophthalmologist. So he operates on gliomas, which is a childhood cancer often that grows on the optic nerve. So it starts when they're 1, and it will grow to such an extent that your visual field will degrade. So you actually stop, and they won't know until the kid it has grown to such an extent that finally the kid starts walking into walls halfway, because they look like they're clumsy because they don't see the cup or whatever. So parents are like, yeah, my kid's whatever, but yeah. So that's my dream, is one day we will have systems that will be so prevalent that won't happen. You'll catch it at 2, because we can actually test the visual field without the child telling you, yeah, I can't see on the right-hand side on the upper quadrant, Mom.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is. But by the time they do find it, a lot of damage is done, and then the operation is incredibly severe. So yeah, I think exactly as you say. Also, there's another level of technology. I mean, come on, what does your phone do? It can measure how many steps you do. All right, mine does it, right? I'm sure yours does as well. I thought mine was like a personal gift from Apple. I'm like, wow, this is awesome. Thank you. But, imagine what we're so used to monitoring. ECGs. It's not like you have to count your heartbeats. And that's very similar to what this is. So why not move into the next century from pushing a button to say every time you hear something or see something? Yeah, it's a little crazy that we're still using that technology.
Yeah, it feels very barbaric.
It does. It feels so, yeah.
Yeah. When I was reading about it, I was like, oh, why is she doing B2B? She should do B2C. Just like go to all these, like set up these little clusters, like roving blood donation vans that just go to towns, set it up. Yeah. I think it'd be a really interesting thing, study or an experiment, if you were to find some of the most difficult, the problem schools, where like in America they have schools where it's like at a certain point you just get segregated into a school if you're like really bad at school or you're just bad in general, and you just gave this test to them. I wonder, as a percentage, how many of them just had hearing or vision problems? They couldn't learn as effectively as everyone else. I bet it'd be like above 80%. Yeah.
You're talking my language.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing, how about the elderly?
Yeah.
Do you know that you have a 40 to 50% chance at a certain age to have a hearing problem? And do you know that if that happens gradually enough, people won't notice, because you just start to disappear. You'll start to isolate. Then the more isolated you get, the more mental health issues you get, the more isolated you get. And then by the time they actually find out, there's a 5 times correlation of early onset dementia with an unaddressed hearing problem. And my dream, actually, what I want to do once we're out there is to go to these, because we've been to elderly homes and they love our test. We have to adjust our test for them because they always fall asleep. But that's cool, right? There's no stress. They get to pick the video. Maybe we do their grandkid photos or something. I don't know, whatever they want. It's no problem to us. But if we can make the test enjoyable, more people will be getting it. And then they can address the issues, or even if they're not willing to wear the hearing aid, at least if the people around them know, oh, Joe can't hear, but let's maybe make sure he's in the front of the room so he can read the lips or, help them out. But my dream is to go to some of these elderly homes, particularly in some parts of the country where there's a huge percentage of dementia. It's almost like a warehouse for dementia at a certain point, because people are living really long, but also they're living really long now with a lot of dementia. What would be cool is to test them, because you can test people with dementia with our systems. Maybe if we can help address these hearing problems, I would be interested to see what that does, if it's possible to help reverse some of this. I don't know.
Yeah.
It would be cool. But
Yeah, I think that's the potential for the technology is really exciting, which is why when I saw first, I think it's like you first start making money. I don't know if I'm allowed to say projection, so I'll like ... that, but it's going to be a little bit before money starts rolling in. And that was the saddest part. It's like, what? People are going to have to wait? I thought it was going to be like, let's get this out like next week. Like all the kids that are definitely going to need it, all the older people. But so it's a hardware and software technology is like, where most of the time people do software or they do hardware and they bundle it together. What's the hard part of that bundle for you guys?
Okay, so we're really software.
Yeah.
So we're very much software. I don't have people, building headsets because what we have, the hardware we need, honestly, we could just buy it off the shelf today.
Yeah.
But, we do want a cool looking system that's as accurate as possible and as comfortable as possible. So you want a very fine, you want the electrodes exactly where they need to be on the headband. You need the right fitting, all that kind of stuff. So we're dealing with a hardware partner on that side, and we will merge our software with the hardware. But honestly, the system is running. We can do tests on people today. We are actually all the time. But you have to get medical certification. And that's the real, and not that you want to talk about unions and all these other things. Let's talk about regulation. So I'm completely supportive that, if I drink tea from this cup, it doesn't explode in my face because somebody has said that this is safe to use as a cup. So I respect that, but it is, especially for a startup, just those 2 years of redoing all your code to a certain standard and you document every step. That's a drag, man. Same on the hardware, then merging it, then doing clinical trials, which is no more than the validation tests we're already doing, just more expensive and slower. And, so it is what it is. But we hope to be in the market with a certified product in 2025. But people are welcome to come by, sign a release, and take a test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think once you get over that hurdle of just spending money and validating, I think this will be successful. I mean, once you get out, if when it's out there and you need like someone to like go around to so many schools, I'll even do that because I think it'd be fun to do. But
I think you'd be great at it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm like I do my best. So what all do you need help with? Are you looking for people that you need to get you to those for the next couple of years to get you where you're going? Like basically, this is anyone listening in, they will potentially apply.
Well, I have an amazing team. I must say, I feel very, very blessed with our R&D team, and they're so good. I don't even think I can possibly tell them how good they are because they're like writing this system is unique. No one else has it. It's all patented, and they're improving it every day. So they're absolutely amazing. As CEO, I'm almost frightened to then add in the marketing guy with all the bullshit, the marketing people, or the business guy who just basically does nothing and bangs his chest, and these are all guys. It sounds very negative. I don't mean it like that, but
it's all right. I take it personal.
Yeah, please don't. But these people are so talented. I'm almost tempted to, so for professionals to build out, I would like to almost keep the DNA of the company as we're super cool and we're doing something nobody else is, and that's just normal for us. Mm-hmm. So the team that we have is great. I'd like to just sort of partner with other people who live and die for we build hardware, and we think this is a great application for EEG, for example. So I'd like to do a lot of these other tasks with advisors and really experienced people who, if they rub me the wrong way, I replace them. Mm-hmm. But I want to keep the core team just so the company and the DNA of the company, I believe, is so precious. But in terms of really bringing us from where we are to where we will be, you need medical and scientific experts. So we've developed them here in the Netherlands. It's going really well. But of course, when we launch in the US, we're going to need, the Mayo Clinic, but really good hospitals and really key opinion leaders to also think this is cool. And maybe for a Dutch company, that's probably a little harder than it is here in the Netherlands. So I've reached out to a couple of universities. We don't have a lot of traction yet, but, I have no doubt somehow we'll get there, but perhaps this is one way that would be really helpful. And the other thing is, of course, the financing. There is good financing here in Europe, but I think in the States, they are, and not to be, American do or die, but they're a little bit more, not risk loving, but risk familiar. Yeah. And I think that makes it hard because everyone, I just went through a round with some VCs and everyone says, well, where's your revenue? And I'm like, guys, there will be revenue, but I need to be certified. And that's quite a big check. And they're all like, yeah, call us when you've got revenue. And I'm like, sweetheart, when I get revenue, I don't need you. So there is that mismatch. And I think there's less of that in the States, which is also that mentality the States has, which is let's give it a try. It could really work and be amazing. Yeah. And Europe can be more conservative. So those would be the two key areas, which is really getting in with the right key opinion leaders to support the idea and, energize us as well. And also on the financing side.
Yeah, I would think that would be easier to get it regulated in America versus Europe as well. Because we don't have the best regulations. That's why the Sackler jerks were able to push the opioid epidemic on everyone. They wanted German's little label. I hate them so much. I hate the Sacklers. Long-time listeners will know I'll start swearing if I keep going. But they basically like gutted an entire generation of people, and they only had to give like a modicum of a fine, and they still made billions of dollars. I don't think you should make money if you like gut the heartland of America. And like they were like corded like wood, stacks of people dying from opioid epidemic overdoses and stuff from these people. But the nice thing about that is our laws are not as stringent, so maybe it'll be easier for you to come over here and then get the good stuff in as we get rid of the bad stuff. Is what I'm saying. I don't mean to associate the two. What you're building is not like the Sacklers.
Okay,
Just to be entirely clear.
Just for the listeners, we're not an opioid.
Yes. Just to be clear, someone like throw it right in. I'll get a right in.
Yeah,
I'll get a right in.
Response required. Hearing test is not an opioid. No, I look. That's one thing I am totally not sensitized to is the opioid crisis, because it happened during those years where I have lived here in Europe, and perhaps I'm just the biggest noob in the world, but I don't think it's an issue here. I mean,
Probably
granted, I had a baby and they gave me an aspirin after 2 days of labor. Well, that was my pain med. But, I would be pissed if other people were getting opioids and I got a paracetamol. But so I don't know. But it seems, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of a unique American thing, which is horrible and sad. But it's something happily very far from my life and my experience.
The Sacklers were able to get someone at the FDA to help them write like their special label and all this other stuff. And that person at the FDA went on to work for them and make millions of dollars. It's also that scenario where you can pitch the doctor specifically how, like, you can market your drugs in America. You can't do that in Europe. Like every day, you haven't seen this since you left the 90s, but when there are commercials, I don't watch commercials. I hate commercials. I will delete a service if they have commercials. But the random ones, if you're sponsoring something like that, that's different. But there will be marketing ads for like 10 different types of Viagra, or like 10 different types of like heart medication, and it's like, or like 10 different types of like STD cure things. It's like there's a lot of marketing that pumps stuff. And so I think it is uniquely American, and I guess it is that the element of like we just try stuff, but in this case it was terrible, and the company who did it probably should have been bankrupt, and like I don't know, there should be like a giant like sovereign fund that pays out anyone that takes all their money, put it in a sovereign fund like the Norwegians do with the oil, and then anyone who gets
the oil revenue,
and we take that and they invest it like a pension fund. But whenever you have like an opioid problem, like an addiction, like a little bit gets pulled out and it funds the treatment center so you can get better, versus like a local municipality.
Yeah, no argument. The only thing is, Obama once did something that I like. I love Obama. I mean, I know he has whatever decisions and things, but I, as a moral person, I like some of the things he says an awful lot. And he said something is, just imagine you're like the richest guy or gal in the world, and you're walking down a street with children and elderly and homeless and sad and awful and starving and how good do you really feel? Like, how much money do you really need to make you feel good about ruining people's lives? Like, I just don't, maybe I'm getting old, but I just don't see the point of getting up in the morning and saying, I'm going to put more money in my bank account by destroying the lives of very nice, kind humans that could be my friends or my family, or even if they're not, they're still human and they deserve our respect. I don't know. I don't see the point. Like, how could you feel good about that?
They probably don't think about it.
I've been over here too long. I just don't see the point. Like, how do you get joy? Oh, hey, Lowell, I'm worth $1 billion and I killed 75,000 people. What kind of people do you hang out with that would like you for that?
They're billionaires. They're billionaires. I'd have like 10 billionaire friends, and then we just like smoke cigars in a circle. Be like, yeah, we were in the Congo yesterday. Yeah. Well, I think I don't want to dox where you live, but I think you live in an area, and I'm not like pointing fingers, but I think you live in an area that has like they did really bad things in the Congo. But I think it's like that. Once it's like far removed, you don't see it.
That was Belgium, yeah.
Okay, good. It's just not where you're at. But apparently France has the same problem. Like they actually get a lot of their money from Africa still, but they're African colonies or whatever. But it seems like if it's far enough away, like if you have like a private jet, yeah, you don't see it. You don't think about it. If you were to poll these people and say, hey, have you thought about this? It's like if you actually could read their brain, the first thought was, I've never heard of this this is the first time I heard of this in my life. Insert generic PR response so I don't get firebombed. Like it's probably a very like boring response. They just don't think about it.
So it's like the not in my backyard distance.
Yes.
What is it? Absence makes the heart, well, the opposite of makes the heart grow fonder. But yeah, out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. I think every community at a certain point becomes like a NIMBY community, like not in my backyard. Yeah. Like whether it's Democrat or Republican. For sure. Like it's all the same. Like whether it's California or like a really, really red state, at a certain point, people just don't want things in their backyard. And I think it's a similar thing. Like, oh, we could build, better housing. So then the housing prices go down. But then they're like, well, you ruined my skyline. It's like, okay, but there's homeless people everywhere. I don't know. But now we're just like soapboxing. We're all agreeing with each other here.
Sorry, we're all over. But I think, I don't know. I do find that, I don't know, making your money by hurting people seems, I can tell you that I get a lot of energy about the fact that we have a great commercial market.
Yeah.
And we're doing the right thing. And the combination is just very, it makes me feel happy. It just energizes me. And I think it also brings people, we have the most amazing young people that come work with us. And, meanwhile, these guys were used to just sitting in a dark room and programming and doing stuff. And with us, they get out there and they see the people that they can help. And they see the smiles. And they say, wow, this is like the human, it's making human lives better. Mm-hmm. And these are people who never thought about their work really reaching the real world.
Yeah.
And if you brought your stuff to the real world and then the patient dies, how good would you feel? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I feel, I guess, blessed that you're doing my favorite two things and I don't have to choose.
Yes.
I kind of like that.
Yeah, I like it when doing well works out. Yeah, it's like it's a supply. I've had people on the show that are building products that break up the supply chain so that then like rare earth minerals that are like mined by slaves in like these giant death pits, we won't need those. And so but the problem is like when you have a country that has all these regulations, like treat the employees well versus a country that doesn't, and they're allowed to be on the same playing field, then they're just going to go like slave. That's why like Nestle did a lot of bad things. They tried owning water. I mean, I don't know. They're like pretty evil.
I heard that story. Yeah, where they dug up somebody's water, put it in bottles, and then sold it back.
Yeah. Well, they did this thing in the 80s and 90s where they went up to nursing mother, and then I have like one last question that we can wrap up. But they went to nursing mothers in the 90s in Africa. Said, hey, our powdered milk is better for your kids. We're going to give you a free amount for as much as you needed until your milk dried up. And then they'd be like, well, now you have to pay for it. They caused a famine. I don't know. It's pretty terrible. But on a positive note, what are some books you recommend that we check out?
Books? Oh,
yes, I need to read.
I read so much, but I don't even remember the names. What do I love?
Yeah, or what that you recommend to me personally? If there's like from this conversation, I
think the most beautiful book. Well, it's A Soldier of the Great War by Mark Helfrich.
Oh, I haven't read that one before. No, I'll check it out.
Long, but it's just gorgeous. It's gorgeous. Like I just think it's a beautiful story of this man's life, young man in Italy during the First World War and then through the Second World War, and he's just an incredible character, incredible man. It's beautifully written. I don't know. It's just I love it. I've read it 100 times.
Oh, sweet.
But no, I think, that's a beautiful book. But I don't even know the names of books. I just read almost everything that I get my hands on. I just truck over to the American bookstore and then, in Lida, fill up my bag. I mostly buy secondhand books now because I read so many. Bring home a bag and then, yeah.
Is there, oh, go ahead.
No. The one thing I do find is, especially with this job, you're working a lot of hours with a lot of decisions and stress and all this other stuff, doing things faster and faster, and as well as you can possibly do, and leading a team of people that's quite different, so you have all these things. Reading, taking time away from this and just relaxing some of your brain to just sit in a corner and read whatever it is something I need to remember to do again.
Yeah.
Because you have to turn off.
Yeah. Once you get in the habit of doing it, it's fantastic. I think Winston Churchill read a book every night during the Blitz, and he, England prevailed as the, I think that's a view from
great guy. Absolutely.
Yes, but where can people stay up to date? Do you have a newsletter or something, or it's just like monitor your website? And then what is the website, if that's the best way?
The website also, we're getting better, although I do find it kind of challenging, this whole LinkedIn thing and posting and stuff. But I am committed to keeping my LinkedIn up to date as to all our new events and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's I think LinkedIn, and then for the big press releases, it'll be on our press release page. But I think those are the two key ways. So we were just written about in a Dutch magazine, so I'm going to be posting that again. And then, I should be better. I haven't really thought about that as much as I should. And my investors are going to all yell at me if they see this next week for my shareholder meeting for not being more positive. But as a small company, writing a newsletter is kind of, that's challenging.
Yeah.
Or be an investor and I'll update you every month with a personal note for me.
I'll give you $1. That's
excellent.
Alrighty then. All right. I want to thank you, Jennifer, for coming on today. I know you couldn't admit that you were related to Jane Goodall, but
I wish I were. I used to pretend to be cool. I'd be, yeah, she's my mom.
Yeah.
We hang.
Well, I think Anne. I think maybe
monkeys. I love monkeys.
Well, monkeys are kind of evil creatures, but I want to thank you for coming on the show today, talking about your work, what you're working on, helping us understand what it's like to negotiate. I just want to thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, it's lovely to speak with you, Lowell. Thank you for having me.